The glass of scotch sat untouched on the mahogany bar. Alina didn't look at the city lights. She looked at the man beside her. "I still don't understand," Alina said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline that always pulsed in his presence. "You can have anyone. Anyone's safe. But you chose me, and I chose you. Why, Kai? Why risk burning down both our worlds?" Kai, known in the shadows as the Ghost, or more brutally, the Ice King, swirled the amber liquid in his glass. His face, sharp and guarded, didn't betray emotion easily. "You're a doctor, Alina. You save lives. He paused, the first sign of genuine vulnerability she'd ever witnessed. "I take things. I break things. You saw a monster and insisted on seeing a man underneath. No one else has ever done that. And you healed something impossible inside me," Alina countered, her hand finding his, a contrast of warm, practiced compassion meeting cold, scarred control. "But your world, my world stops at your door," Kai stated, his voice a low, fierce promise. "I won't let it touch you. I promise you that." But the lie was visible in the way his eyes constantly scanned the room, the way his body remained coiled, always ready for a fight. He was a force of nature, and his nature was chaos. Their relationship was an intense, secret dance between healing and harm. Scenes of soft, intimate connection, a shared quiet moment in the pre-dawn light, a tenderness only known to them, were sharply intercut with the harsh reality of Kai's empire. His lie about safety felt heavy when he returned from a night of work. His expensive shoes stained with rain and something that looked suspiciously like blood. The danger wasn't just abstract. It was personified by Marco, a ruthless rival crime lord, whose escalating aggression against Kai's organization threatened to spill over. A specific, coded warning reached Kai. Klav was hitting their supply lines, getting desperate. Alina tried to bury herself in her work at City General Hospital. She worked double shifts in the trauma ward, seeking solace in her professional oath, the clarity of saving lives, a direct moral opposite to Kai's destruction. "My work matters," she told herself, scrubbing her hands raw. "I'm making good in the world." She was focused on a chart, preparing for a complex surgery when the world violently tilted. The first sound was a muffled thud from the hospital's sublevel, instantly followed by a metallic shriek of tearing infrastructure. The lights flickered, plunged into darkness, and then snapped back on, revealing a scene of utter, devastating chaos. Smoke billowed through the trauma ward vents. Alarms wailed. The hospital bombing, orchestrated by Marco, had shattered Alina's last fortress. Alina didn't freeze. Instinct took over. She spent the next hour working in the near dark, directing nurses, stabilizing victims, and triaging the horrific casualties. When the smoke finally cleared, revealing the twisted metal and blood, the full toll was visible. The attack had been precise, targeting a wing that housed many long-term patients and, most devastatingly, a children's physical therapy unit. Later, sitting alone in the wreckage of her sterile operating room, Alina heard the cries of the nurses, the distant sirens, and the terrible silence where the laughter of children should have been. Her professional detachment was destroyed, replaced by overwhelming, toxic guilt. Kai found her there, her surgical scrubs soaked and stained, her face white with trauma. He tried to touch her, but she recoiled instantly, shrinking away from his presence. "Don't," she commanded, her voice thin and shaking. "Don't touch me. Look around, Kai. Just look around you." He saw the wreckage. He saw the bodies being carried out. His face hardened into a mask of pure, devastating agony. "This is your fault," Alina accused, the words sharp and unforgiving. "This is your war. This is the price of the life you lead. I saved 3 lives tonight, Kai. But I lost 2 children because of your enemies. I will not be the collateral damage of your monster. Alina, I promise to protect you. You protect me? By bringing the war to my hospital? By costing innocent lives? No, you don't get to live in my world, and I won't live in yours. You end this war, Kai, or you leave me alone forever. The ultimatum hung heavy in the air. Kai understood the stakes. He had 2 choices: surrender the only source of light he had ever known, or become the monster she accused him of being, but direct his violence toward securing her peace. He didn't hesitate. He looked at the wreckage of her world and made a vow that was terrifying in its intensity. You want the war to end? It ends, but I won't lose you. I swear, Alina, I will end this. I will find every man responsible, and I will tear down everything they built. I will burn down my entire empire, if that's what it takes to secure your peace. The promise was less about love and more about possession, a terrifying display of the Ice King's nature, now completely focused by devotion. Kai kept his word. The war that followed the hospital bombing was not a battle for territory or profits. It was a brutal, focused campaign of retribution driven purely by his terrifying love for Alina. The intelligence network that had always served as greed now served as fear of losing her. Alina saw the reports on the news: warehouses burning, assets seized, rivals disappearing. She had demanded he end the war, but she had unleashed a far more devastating force, a monster directed by devotion. The violence, though achieving her request for peace, pushed the wedge deeper between them. She knew that every body bag was a direct consequence of her ultimatum. Marco, recognizing the unnatural, unyielding fury driving Kai, finally cracked. He reached out through an intermediary, proposing a truce meeting. Kai knew it was a trap. He knew Marco would see this as his last opportunity to end the war by ending the Ice King. But a truce was the only path left to fulfill his promise to Alina. It's a suicide mission, Kai, his lieutenant warned him. Clav doesn't talk peace. He talks blood. I know, Kai replied, adjusting the reinforced vest beneath his jacket. But if I don't go, I lose the only thing I've ever fought for that actually matters. The meeting was set for a cold, abandoned factory on the city's perimeter. The atmosphere was thick with betrayal and finality. Kai walked into the vast, echoing space alone. The Ice King, humbled by a skirt. Marco sneered, emerging from the shadows with 2 heavily armed men. I knew your doctor would be your weakness. Where's the truce, Kai? I only see a funeral. Marco drew his weapon. The fight was swift and brutal, a desperate dance in the darkness. Kai, despite being outnumbered, fought with the precision and ferocity of a man who had already accepted his death, but needed one last victory. He disarmed Marco's men, the sounds of metal hitting concrete echoing through the factory. The moment came, the one that would define Kai's future. Marco was disarmed, bleeding, and trapped beneath the weight of Kai's fury. Kai held a piece of jagged metal, its edge glinting in the weak light. Do it, you bastard, Marco snarled, his eyes desperate. Finish the cycle. Kai looked down at his rival. He saw the cold path of his past, the easy, final solution. He thought of the bodies at the hospital. He thought of Alina's face, covered in soot and grief. He thought of the vow he had made to her. He dropped the weapon. The clatter of the metal was deafening. He reached for his phone and signaled his security team, who swarmed the area. The cycle is over, Marco, Kai stated, his voice heavy with finality. I don't need your blood to win. You belong to the police now. Kai's decision to spare Marco and surrender him to the authorities was the pivotal moment of moral reckoning. It was the hardest thing he had ever done, a complete rejection of the identity he had meticulously built. He had chosen legitimate, difficult redemption over the finality of violence. The war was over. Marco was in custody. Kai's organization was temporarily paralyzed, but safe. Yet, the emotional gap between him and Alina remained a chasm. Alina was consumed by grief and survivor's guilt. She refused to see Kai, answering his calls only with silence or curt, formal demands for updates on the Clav cleanup. Her trauma was her new fortress. Kai was isolated, vulnerable, and alone in the aftermath of his immense moral sacrifice. He knew his word alone was not enough. He needed an act that was so profound, so symbolic, that it would bridge the emotional and moral distance she had placed between them. He needed a gesture that said, "I have changed my nature for you." He focused all his immense resources, not on rebuilding his empire, but on one task. He learned that Alina often walked through the city general hospital courtyard before her late shift, a space that remained desolate, cold, and a constant reminder of the attack. For 3 days, he worked in secret. Alina arrived at the hospital for her shift, her shoulders slumped with exhaustion and dread. She walked toward the trauma entrance, her eyes downcast, bracing herself for the cold familiarity of the place. She paused. The desolate hospital courtyard was gone. In its place was a vision of profound, restorative beauty. Thousands of white and red roses blanketed the ground. Soft, intricate lights were strung high above, turning the cold air into a gentle, warm glow. There was music, a string quartet playing a melancholy but hopeful piece. The air smelled of clean earth and fresh blossoms, not smoke and antiseptic. Kai had transformed the physical site of her trauma into a sanctuary. It was his ultimate exposed act of vulnerability, a plea for her future. He stood waiting in the center of the transformed courtyard. He wore a simple, dark sweater, no suit, no weapons, no armor. He looked utterly exposed. Alina's medical bag fell to the ground. She didn't cry. She just stared at the impossible sight, the immense power of his devotion laid bare for her. Kai signed a word slowly, clearly, his hands steady with conviction. "I ended the war. I chose you. Now, I need you to choose me." The scene held. The exhausted healer standing before the ruthless king who had sacrificed his empire for a chance at redemption.